Just to recap, if you are joining us now, at least 12 people have been killed following a mass shooting by two gunmen at Bondi Beach in Sydney, with 29 currently in hospital. Now, one of the gunmen is among the dead. Footage from the scene shows a man wresting a pump-action shotgun from a gunman. Now, the attack happened as people celebrated the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. In a press conference, the New South Wales Police Premier Chris Minnis said that one of the gunmen had been killed and another one was in custody.
Two individuals began firing on a crowded group of families on Bondi Beach at Archer Park. This cowardly act of terrifying violence is shocking and painful to see and represents some of our worst fears about terrorism in Sydney. I very sadly need to report that as of now, there are at least 12 individuals that have been killed. One of the offenders has also been killed and one is in custody. This attack was designed to target Sydney's Jewish community on the first day of Hanukkah.
Australian police say that they are currently investigating if there is a third offender. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says that the evil that was unleashed at Bondi Beach today is beyond comprehension.
This afternoon, there has been a devastating terrorist incident at Bondi at the Hanukkah by the Sea celebration. This is a targeted attack on Jewish Australians on the first day of Hanukkah, which should be a day of joy, a celebration of faith. An act of evil anti-Semitism, terrorism, that has struck the heart of our nation. An attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on every Australian, and every Australian tonight will be, like me, devastated.
Well, more than 50 gunshots were heard as hundreds of people fled the scene in Sydney at around about 6:40 p.m. That's local time.
I ran onto the beach. I guess everyone ran onto the beach. It was pretty terrifying. I eventually went back to see what was happening. A few people helped a few old people get up and get out of there, but it was like there were lots of bodies on the floor.
Absolutely terrifying. Now, there have been plenty of reaction here in the UK, with the Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer saying it is deeply distressing news and described it as an appalling attack. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has announced that extra officers from the Metropolitan Police will be on the streets of London following the attack. He said, "My thoughts and condolences, along with the rest of London, are with everyone affected by the horrific attack at Bondi Beach, Australia today." Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has reacted to the tragic event in Australia, saying the Hanukkah party shooting in Australia is horrendous. The threat is everywhere.
Genuinely horrendous. Last I hear, it's 10 dead and many, many wounded. I did see some video of an heroic Australian, taking the gun out of the hands of one of these terrorists. Desperately sorry for the Jewish community in Sydney, which is quite considerable. But equally, you realise actually the threat to the Jewish people is everywhere. It's not just in Manchester or in parts of North London, it's all over the world. And there is this real poison.
The Director of Public Affairs at the Jewish Leadership Council, Russell Langer, joins me now. Russell, welcome to the programme. Russell, let's talk about what's happening, because to me it seems absolutely abhorrent that Jewish people, in my view, have been allowed to be castigated, vilified across the world in many countries without... It seems as though anti-Semitism has almost been normalised.
Hi, good afternoon. It is abhorrent. It's an international issue. This attack happened in Australia. It's the other side of the world, but for the British Jewish community, it might as well be next door down the road. We will know people who were there, who were on the beach at the time. I didn't think I knew anybody, but then later found out through family WhatsApp groups that I had distant family members there. It's we're a small, close-knit community, but around the world, there were those motivated by this evil who see Jews celebrating and want to kill them. And that's happened in Australia today. It happened 2 months ago in Manchester on a different Jewish festival. And it happened in Israel on October 7th on a different Jewish festival. Our Jewish festivals are a time for the Jewish community to come together, celebrate, mark them in the appropriate way. For some people, as we can see, there are those who just want to come out and kill us.
It just, to me, I didn't realise it, but to the Jewish community, it is perfectly normal for you to have guards outside synagogues. Children being walked to school by people to other people, so they're protecting them. To me, I wasn't aware of all of that, but it seems to me that the Jewish people have been tolerating a lot of hate for a very long time.
That's exactly it. It's so normalised that a lot of the time we forget that other people don't understand that. I grew up in this country, going to school in this country, behind high fences and security. If you go to any Jewish communal location, you will find that, including our places of worship. But it's also important to note, because this was a Hanukkah event on Bondi Beach, what sort of makes Hanukkah different in that sense. Hanukkah is the time of year where we come out of our places of worship and our homes. We don't celebrate it behind those fences. It's the festival of light. The whole purpose is to share that, and we celebrate that with communal gatherings in major locations in city centres and on local high streets. That's what the people of were doing on Bondi Beach when they were attacked. But that's also what's going to be happening across the UK and elsewhere in the world over the next 8 nights. And once again, we have just seen we always take that threat seriously. We always have to consider the security for gatherings like that. Once again, we've been reminded why.
How do you feel when you hear London Mayor Sadiq Khan saying that he's putting extra officers on to protect Jewish people, and he said his thoughts and condolences, along with the rest of London, are with everyone affected by the horrific attack at Bondi Beach, Australia today? He said that, but then we've had week after week after week after week of pro-Palestine protests in the UK, with people holding placards saying, all sorts of anti-Semitic tropes, and not much has been done about it.
I was in Manchester the day after the Heaton Park attack 2 months ago, which occurred on Yom Kippur, and I just felt this visceral anger from the Jewish community there. We saw that at the vigil, and we saw how that was expressed towards British politicians. But that anger just comes from, as you said, that generations of this normalization of being used to being behind security, and this feeling that these attacks are just a matter of time. We're just waiting for the one that's going to be successful. And we saw that in Manchester. We've seen it around the world, in the USA and today in Australia. But I think what angers people the most is, I think we're done with security. That security is important. We need that police presence because we've seen what that threat is, and that threat is real. But we're done with this idea that this is a problem that could be sorted with some extra policing and some extra security. We have deep underlying issues, which is why events happening elsewhere lead to people wanting to perpetrate violence in our communities. And that's not enough. Yes, we need police. Yes, we need security. But ultimately, what is being done to make sure that we don't need that security?
What do you think needs to happen then? Because security is a sort of, it's a reactive measure. It's not a proactive measure, really. So what do you need the governments to be doing to we need to wipe all of this sort of hatred out? How do you think they could go about that?
We do. I think that starts with understanding where that hatred comes from. Anti-Semitism is prevalent in many forms of extremism. The attack that happened in the UK most recently was an Islamist attack. I'm not aware of the police in Australia having ascribed any particular motives, but we've seen Islamist attacks around the world. We've seen far-right attacks in America. There is no shortage of groups and extremist ideologies who are out there wanting to see dead Jews and wanting to see other people who value Western liberal values be killed. And we need to look at what those forms of extremism are, not be squeamish about talking about each of those forms and what needs to be done, and looking at how we as a country react to the fact that our communities are being divided by events that are happening elsewhere. This isn't an international issue. This is a British issue, and we need to remember that.
I do find it shocking, really, the levels of racism that are put towards the Jewish community, because as a black female, I don't experience this level of racism ever. And most of, my family, we don't have to have security when we go to schools or anything like that. And I'm just kind of appalled that it has been allowed to get to this level, and the Jewish people have been quiet about it, because you actually have been very calm about it and just gone about your business, looking after yourselves and your families without making a big deal out of it. I think you are right now to demand that the government do something. But in terms of what specifically they could do to kind of wipe it out, what would you like to see happen?
Well, you're absolutely right. I would say I think the community has been quiet about it for quite a long time because it's been so normalised. And the Manchester attack specifically was a real wake-up call to our community that this isn't normal. This isn't a normal way of living, and more needs to be done. We've worked really hard with government because ultimately anti-Semitism is so prevalent across society. There aren't easy answers on how to fix this. There's no easy way. I think the government needs to start with a proper extremism strategy, and that's been missing. We need to look at how this is pervasive in our schools. If we look back at the Manchester attack, this was somebody who may have been born elsewhere but lived here from a very young age and went through a British education system, and that obviously has failed in this instant, and we're well aware of anti-Semitism in schools. We need to look at workplaces, including in the public sector, the horrific stuff that we're seeing in the NHS. And ultimately, when we see this low-level stuff being tolerated and people seeing this as a green light that they can get away with it, that just escalates into people taking things further until ultimately people are emboldened to go and take violent action. I keep talking about the Manchester attack because that's the one that was successful in killing Jews in this country. But we've seen failed plots. We've seen plots which have been foiled by the UK authorities, which thankfully we're not here discussing because they didn't succeed. But it's just, we've seen the one succeed, but there's going to be more. There's going to be others trying, and more needs to be done across the board.
Now, I know that, obviously, the BBC have been held up for a lot of the things, that their coverage being anti-Israel, which some people will then view that as anti-Semitic. And you've had, when they had the Glastonbury coverage, they had Bob Villan shouting death to the IDF. Now, I'm sure he would argue that he's not being anti-Semitic and specifically targeting the IDF as an Israeli force. But it does seem that a lot of these organisations and these so-called people that are meant to talk about all the things that are going on in the world have almost made things worse. It feels like they've inadvertently kind of gone along with all of this and put more power into it. I'm kind of trying to work out how we fix this. Do you think that all of this is also part of the multiculturalism in this country as well? Do you think multiculturalism has kind of gone wrong, really, and isn't working, and it is partly to blame?
So on your first point, in terms of the language, that I think you made several examples there. We have seen, be it politicians, be it celebrities, artists, other forms, tripping over themselves to try to use ever more extreme rhetoric without any concern as to what the consequences are. People playing politics about a conflict happening elsewhere with absolutely zero regard to the devastating impact that it's having in this country. And look, ultimately, more needs to be done. I don't think community cohesion is working in this country. Too many times, interfaith projects have been completely disrupted by extremists who reject any idea of interaction between Muslim groups who want to work with the Jewish community, especially at times like this, to show solidarity, and unfortunately are scuppered in doing that by extremists within their own community. These are real issues. I think, unfortunately, it's been too easy to sweep them under the carpet and ignore that they've been happening, but more and more evidence just shows that that's just not a solution.
All right, Russell Langer, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. He's the Director of Public Affairs at the Jewish Leadership Council.